Hi guys, my name's Dale and welcome back to D&D Gaming. In for a review this time around is Bullet Hell first-person shooter Mothergunship. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dav.
Hi guys, this Bullet Hell first-person shooter is developed by Grip Digital and Terrible Posture Games, released in 2018 on PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. A robotic alien life form has conquered Earth and it's your job to destroy the fleet of ships and the Mothergunship to regain control from the alien scum. Battle and bullet dodge your way through randomly generated levels where the odds are severely stacked against you. Craft weapon combinations to give you the edge against the alien force. So Dale, what were your first impressions?
So I'd originally seen this game a couple of years ago when it first came out. At the time, there was quite a few of these Bullet Hell type games coming out. But to be honest, this is the first one I've played. And so, yeah, all pretty new to me, really. I'm Bullet Hell FPS with huge guns, swarms of enemies, and loads of modification of weapons.
Yeah, mine was the same, first play of a Bullet Hell game, so didn't really have anything to base my impressions off of, other than the name and screenshots and stuff. Bullet Hell, it's kind of obvious what you're going to be facing. You kind of knew it was going to be Carnage, really. So what were your general thoughts following playthrough?
So I did mostly enjoy it due to the nature of these bullet hell type games. Obviously very fast paced, which I expected. I did kind of wonder if this is going to be like intensely difficult, like so much that it's just I'm going to end up rage quitting every 5 minutes. Luckily it wasn't like that. I know some are even more intense and skill based than this, but I think they got the balance about right. You do get a kind of nice break at times between the different level sections, and when you go back to the HQ, when you get that kind of break. So it's not just continuous intensity. I thought they got the balance about right there. Gameplay does get a bit repetitive though, if I'm being honest. It's one of the main, negatives for me about the game, which we'll come on to later. But equally, it can also be addictive. If you're having a really good run, I found I sit there and do multiple levels, just one after the other, because you really get in that kind of zone, just having a good time with it. I found there was some funny dialogue at times from the NPCs.
A wise officer hides his ignorance from his superiors. You can take that pearl to the bank. That's a Colonel original.
Pretty sure everyone knows how dumb you are, Colonel.
But not much of a story generally, which again, somewhat expected. The focus is on the guns and the gameplay, and so that's really what they've put all the focus on.
Yeah, I really like this. Absolute carnage. Certainly not a game you want to play just before hitting the sack, otherwise you wouldn't be able to sleep. I mean, it's got its faults, but it is great fun to play and good for taking your stress out on. It's a good game to pick up. I'd certainly pick up again for some of that sort of bullet dodging, crazy weapon crafting fun, really. In terms of graphic options,
I found these were decent enough, to be honest. I mean, just enough, a little bit of customization here and there. And I just kind of liked, the graphics, how they were really on default anyway. So I didn't feel the need to kind of change any of the options. There is a FOV slider included, which is nice. Yeah, reasonably basic.
Yeah, I thought there were a few options to choose from. You wouldn't really expect many in a game of this type. So how did yours manage in terms of graphics performance?
Yeah, so I put the specs on screen as usual. I played with everything either on high or epic, where there was the option to have it on epic. But the graphics overall, I really like the style actually. One of the main positives for me. Almost reminded me a little bit of Borderlands. Yeah, I really like the graphics in this one actually.
Yeah, so I ran with everything on Epic. Yeah, like I say, some of the settings, the maximum was high, but it ran really well on my PC with no graphic issues or frame rate issues or anything. And yeah, similarly, I thought the graphics were really good. It's built in the Unreal Engine 4, which I've used myself for some sort of basic game development, and it's a highly capable engine in terms of graphics. I thought the textures looked nice, lots of rusted and wearing textures on guns, and the lighting was quite effective and reflections were good. The colours are quite luminous, and the game certainly had a kind of pop to it graphically. So in terms of player control options, how did you find those?
So usual standard controls on keyboard. As usual, I was playing on keyboard and mouse. The mouse, you use both buttons, one for each hand or gun, depending on whether what you've got in your hands, which again just worked well. I mean, most of the time you're just kind of holding them down, to be honest, because it reloads automatically. And so, you got full key rebindings, and this is a first person only game.
Yeah, so I found it was useful to have the full key rebindings and the FOV slider, as we mentioned earlier. Controls are really simple and straightforward, but that's all you need for this type of game, really. The movement as the player is really fast, which obviously has to be, otherwise you get barrage of bullets in your face. So yeah, the movement was quite fluid, and yeah, you certainly can't stand still for long. So in terms of game structure and mechanics, you blast your way through rooms that are randomly generated and vary in difficulty and enemies to fight in each room. When you first start a mission, the room you start in has a crafting bench for crafting your weapons. Crafting is really simple, but it is pretty cool. You have 3 tabs that contain connectors, barrels and caps. The connectors allow multiple guns and caps to be connected together and provide a lot of different combinations. Barrels are the actual weapons themselves, and there's quite a few different weapons. I think I counted about 22 in total, and they also have their own subcategories. Grey weapons are the most basic of the type, blue are slightly better, and purple are the best. You can collect multiple versions of these to use in missions. The colour denotes increases in damage, fire rate, accuracy, etc. However, note the better the gun, the more energy it uses, and then you just sort of reloading and replenishing more often. Caps are add-ons that provide an increase in damage, a rate of fire, and much more. The crafting generally is great fun, providing tons of combination and some crazy looking weapons. After crafting your weapon, you then walk through a corridor up to a room door. All is quiet when the door opens, and you sort of look around. When you step inside, the enemies materialise and all hell breaks loose. You can't even stand still for a second. The enemies are procedurally generated and vary per room with, I think it was about maybe 10 different types of enemies. As you destroy enemies, they drop XP, health and coins that you can collect. The XP are small purple coloured diamonds, and these can be collected and used to improve your stats. The health icons replenish your health bar if it's low, and as for the coins, these can be spent in the shops. There are additional rooms in some of the areas of the ship that you go through. Weapons have an energy bar, and once they empty, they auto replenish or reload with a short wait period. You have a set number of 3 jumps, and these replenish the same as the energy bar. However, more jumps could be added by finding jump icons that appear in the room sometimes. Health and energy icons can also be found. These increase the maximum you can hold of both of these. The rooms you go through on the ship sometimes provide extra challenges, and these are donated by a double sword emblem across the door. The challenge starts as the door opens, and there are challenges such as not to stand still for a set period of time, not to use a particular set of weapons for a period of time, or to eliminate all the security in the room, for example.
There's one main game mode, and you start in your headquarters on the ship. The control panel at the front of the ship provides a map and gives you a selection of missions to attempt. The Mothergunship itself is cloaked, and your main mission is to take out the ships that are cloaking it before taking on the Mothergunship itself. The ships cloaking it are donated by a number which relates to their threat level. When you start on a ship, if for example it's a ship with threat level 2, then with each room you complete, the threat level ramps up from say 2.10 to 2.20 and so on. There are also additional side missions and challenges on smaller ships that appear that can be taken on to increase your coins, XP, or find new weaponry. Some side missions require you to use weapons that you have in your arsenal, and you lose these weapons if you die in the mission. Others provide a set selection of weapons that you have to start the mission with. On your ship, there's a mech crafting area where you can use your XP to increase your health, movement speed, or number of jumps that you start the level with. Also, there's a training room where you can craft weapons and test them out.
So in terms of UI, the UI is very simple, just health and weapon energy bars, collected coins and XP, and number of jumps.
In terms of sound and music, I found a decent voice acting all around from the NPCs.
Should be getting close. Implant the data core into the ship, and it'll do the rest itself.
And that's it?
Oh no, Cupcake. I also set the data core to rig the ship to explode after. That's how we roll.
Excellent. I like you, Doctor.
There's only a few characters actually in the main story. Voice acting was pretty good. I thought they were excellent gun sounds, to be honest. Obviously a real variety because there are so many different weapons, but yeah, I feel they got these spot on actually. I thought the music was suitable for this genre. It's usually a kind of heavier type of music, which is expected. Again, really kind of just worked with the game. You have kind of background music at the HQ and in the menus, and yeah, I thought that all worked well.
Yeah, I thought the sounds were good. The music was a bit repetitive, but it does suit the game. It gets you quite pumped up when it comes in. During the sort of small sections between the rooms, the sort of corridors, it quietens down a bit, but then ramps up as you step into the rooms and the enemies appear. So in terms of bugs and glitches, did you have any issues with these?
I did notice there was this kind of constant small freeze between sections of levels. You could only just catch it. We're talking like milliseconds, but it was something I noticed. And having a look online, other people seem to have had a similar issue. It tended to be just before the door opened to go into the next section. It was relatively minor, to the point where I am kind of nitpicking because it wasn't detrimental to the gaming experience, but it was something that was noticeable. I did get a couple of big FPS drops, but literally a couple, and this was where in the later levels with so many enemies on the screen.
So I didn't find any bugs or glitches really. It ran really smooth on mine, considering the amount of these going on.
So to sum up, things I liked about the game, for me, the sheer number and variety of weapons and all the modifications that you could do to them was just awesome. I've not seen anything like this in any other game. To the amount you can modify them, you can end up, even if you're trying to craft the same gun that you've done before, it's quite hard to almost do that because there's so many different parts. I mean, that wasn't an issue because I did find there was a few key weapons after doing some testing that just worked really well for me. So I would normally take those if I had the option into the level and then take it from there, because the shops throughout the level are basically the weapons are randomly generated, or the connectors, etc. So you can't always create the same weapon anyway. A lot of it is the kind of RNG of like, oh, what's going to be in the shop this time. As we mentioned, you can only take so many weapons into each level. Sometimes as few as one, sometimes up to about 5 or 6. But yeah, just so much modification of the weapons. It was awesome. I like the variety of levels in the main campaign. I noticed in a couple of sections they started to get a bit samey, but generally, from the start to finish of the campaign, there was a nice variety of levels, and it tended to be the side missions that I noticed were more of kind of the same, I guess, because they were based on the smaller ships. Yeah, nice variety of levels. Big one for me was the graphic style. There's something about it I just really liked. It just worked perfectly for the game, and again, considering the amount it's trying to process at times with the sheer number of bullets and explosions on the screen, yeah, they really got that balance right. As said, for me, there was only like a couple of FPS drops, but otherwise it was able to process it no problem, and yeah, just really nice graphic style.
Yeah, so I really like this game. Crazy bullet flying insanity. It's great fun to play. Crafting is awesome. As you're mentioning, the sheer number of possibilities for the weapon modifications is just endless, and you can really put together some awesome weapons. And similarly, I did find certain weapons worked better than others, but again, it was quite good the way you could adapt those and create different combinations and find combinations that worked for you or worked for that particular scenario. The random procedural generated rooms and environments did start to look insane at times. You had ones with like spinning sort of spikes and cogs and just lava everywhere, and ones that were sort of 4 or 5 levels high, and the rooms were sort of got larger and larger and expanded, especially within the campaign ships. So this really did sort of give a decent amount of environments, although, like say, some of the side mission ones did get a bit repetitive, but they did look cool, and the difficulty really started to ramp up on the sort of environments and things as well. I like the humour from the NPC voiceovers in the game. It's quite tongue-in-cheek, but it really did suit the game.
So in terms of things I didn't like, I'd say one of the big negatives for me was the amount of kind of RNG, i.e. randomness, that was involved. As I touched on earlier, in the shops that are on the levels, you'd go in and you never quite know what you're going to get. And there's only 6 different options to buy in the particular shop. So as you go in, there's 3 on one side, 3 on the other. That might be health if your health's getting low, but that won't always be there. Sometimes it'd be connectors, where there's normally a mix of connectors and weapons and caps. Yeah, I found this could really turn how you're going to do on that particular level. I did find it could be very repetitive, and there was quite a lot of grind to it, with very little depth to the actual story. I mean, again, somewhat expected going into this. You can tell just from reading the brief description or looking at some screenshots what this is going to be. I feel like they could have really expanded on it, because the early game set a good tone. Early on, there was this big boss level type section, and I thought, oh, this is awesome. And then almost never saw one of those again until the very end. And in between on the main campaign, it was kind of quite samey with very little in the way of like bosses. I think they could have kind of expanded it a bit more with a few main bosses. I did find it gets unbalanced towards the end, especially after the main campaign, where the enemies ramp up even more. As I say, I got almost like stuck on one section, yet the section before and after were actually quite straightforward. So it kind of threw me off, and I was like, am I doing this wrong? Do I need to change my weapons? Do I need to do some more side missions, to get more XP? But yeah, a little bit unbalanced at times. I did find it frustrating where there was sometimes a shop on the first or second section of the level when you don't have any coins or not enough to actually upgrade anything. So you go into the shop and you'd be like, I've only got 1 coin. Everything is 2+, or, everything I want is 2 coins plus. And then other times there'd be massive gaps of sections with no shops at all. And you're looking around the whole level like, where's the shop? Where's the shop? And it's like, oh shit, it's not there. And then you think, I've got to go in this next section. I've got to do a whole nother section and hope there's a shop in that one. And again, that kind of ties in with the balance of things. Just went a little bit off at times. I found the power-ups that you get that come generally after you've killed the enemies. Sometimes they land in kind of unreachable places. Sometimes they're kind of dropped to the floor and they're not where you can get them. But a couple of times I just noticed they ended up in places like in the middle of the lava pit. And you'll be like, oh, I want to get that like health upgrade, but it's right in the middle, and you almost like jump across it just to get it. Which, I feel they could have maybe just changed that. So perhaps they drew, as you get close to them, they kind of draw towards you, but they could have done that from maybe more of a distance away, so you didn't have to run right up to them. Found the secret locations, as they call them, required a lot of searching due to the randomness of their location. Again, understandable because they are supposedly secret, but once you did find them, they were basically just the same power-ups that you'd get from some of the enemies that dropped them anyway. I didn't find there was any particular reason to really search out these locations. And in any case, you couldn't always get them. You get to the end of the level and you say, oh, I got 3 out of 16. But you could never get all 16 because they're off on different branches and you can't backtrack in the level. So unless I'm wrong, I don't think you could ever get every secret in the level anyway. They are completely random. At one point, I just happened to walk next to a section of wall and the whole wall opened up. The secret was in there, even though to find that I would have had to just walk around the whole section just to find it. I did find there were too many exits. I didn't really see the purpose. I mean, it explains early on that essentially whichever exit you take, you're going to end up in the same place. You're going to kind of end up in the middle of the ship where the detonate button is. But at some point I noticed there's like 5 or 6 different branches to go off on. And I thought, well, I'd rather almost like, I was thinking, well, what if, is that way going to be better? Even if they're the same, they look essentially the same. I just found perhaps there could have been a bit more guidance really, rather than having so many random exits you could go off from. I did notice there was some very OP enemies later in the game. In particular, I ended up Googling it, but I was like, what are these bloody things? There's these flying things called gnats apparently, but they were really difficult to shoot because of the size of them. And they were like spot on with hitting you. And yeah, I just noticed every time I went into a level where these gnat things are, these flying robots, I was just like, oh great, here we go. And a couple of times I died simply because of those. So not all the flying enemies were like that. Some were much easier than others. But I noticed some of them, especially in the later game, got very overpowered.
Yeah, so my main gripe with the game was repetitiveness and grindiness, as you mentioned already. Even though the rooms are randomly generated, they do get a bit repetitive, as do the enemies. As the difficulty ramps up, you get more of a mix of environments, with bigger rooms and lava spikes and traps and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know whether there was quite enough thrown into the procedurally randomly generated aspect of the game. If there'd been slightly more, it might have mixed it up a bit more. There's obviously not much of a story to the game. You don't expect much from these types of games, but yeah, it was a bit generic and not particularly interesting. But one thing that was a bit fun was the humour from the NPCs, I guess. As Dale's already mentioned, the shops are few and far between at times, and frequently where you had coin to spend or you needed to get some health, you wouldn't find a shop anywhere. And similarly, when you had no coins to spend, you'd see loads of the shops like on every different section. So this could get quite frustrating, especially when the difficulty of the game ramps up. The item pickups disappear very quickly, and this got a little bit frustrating in larger rooms. So if you were, say, up on a higher level, bridges and things, you could be shooting an enemy that's in the middle of the air, you destroy them, the bits they drop, the XP and coins and health and stuff falls down. And if you're in a room that's, say, 5 levels up, it will drop right to the bottom of the levels. And then if you really need that health, you've then got to run down the levels trying to get to it, and as Dale's already pointed out, sometimes they land in like lava or something, so then you got to try and sort of jump your way across and not land in the lava to get them, so that could be a bit difficult at times.
So I feel there were perhaps a few missed opportunities. For me, I found there could have been more XP per mission that you get instead of promoting this kind of grinding to level up. I noticed that you don't get an awful lot of XP per mission, normally enough to do perhaps one upgrade, which is fine. But what I've noticed is even by the time I came to the last level, in terms of the total XP, you're nowhere near maxing everything out. And so again, I feel that perhaps comes into just a slight issue with the balancing, which could have been resolved, I feel, if you got a little bit more XP, then by the time you get to the last mission where you're on the Mothergunship itself, you could basically have everything maxed out in terms of health and jumps, etc. For me, I put most of it into health, as I normally do in these sort of games, but it did mean there was only a couple of points in jump, for example. So I think they could have perhaps resolved that a little bit with a bit more XP. I found you rarely got the chance in a standard mission to go really crazy with the guns, either due to the fact that you could only take, for most of the missions, between 3 and 5 of the guns or connectors, etc., into the mission. And then if you get unlucky with the kind of randomness of the shot, then you can't really have these massive guns. Again, it depends. There's a lot of randomness in how many coins you get, how many, what comes up in the shop. But I found often I'd kind of get to this midpoint where I had, a lot of guns on there, but not to the point where, you see them. I noticed in some of the screenshots, for example, on the Steam page, you see them with loads and loads of connectors, and you think, oh yeah, that looks awesome. But rarely in the game, in the main missions itself, could you expand them that much. I found there was a couple of side missions essentially, which are like the endless mode, and that you could have more opportunity to really go crazy with the guns. But I feel it limited you just a little bit. I feel there could have been a slightly longer main story campaign with that little bit more variety we touched on, and then there would be no need for this endless continuation, because my understanding is so I did complete the last level, and then it goes on to this kind of endless continuation. And I've had a look online, and people say that basically there is no kind of real end to that. You can just keep going and going, and for me, if there's no real end to it there, I'm probably not going to want to come back to continue playing it. Whereas if they had a slightly longer main campaign, then it could be like the end kind of thing. Yeah, rather than just being like, oh, you done that, but here you go, here's like a million more missions to do.
Yeah, so in terms of missed opportunities, I felt the crafting was really good. The weapon crafting was really good, but it kind of needed a swap function. It was frustrating when you had a weapon set together, but due to the varying size of weapons, if you wanted to add, say, a bigger weapon, and it was clashing with another weapon, you'd have to sometimes remove it right the way back to the connector, and then re-add your items on, and that just got a bit annoying. It would have been good to have a function where, you know, it just needed a button or something where you could select a weapon that was already connected, and then click on the swap function and then drop down to a one that you wanted to swap it with. And it just would have saved a bit of sort of faff of sort of kind of going backwards and forwards with the connectors and the different weapon arrangements to try and get it to work how you wanted it to. There was a variety of side missions, but I think these could have really been expanded quite a way. I went on one quite amusing side mission where everything was out of scale, so you were really, really small, and the enemies were huge, and the bullets were, you know, like 50 times the size of what they usually would be, which was really funny at first, but it did get a bit frustratingly slow because you could only move quite slow because you were so small. But I think that was quite an interesting sort of aspect to do it as a side mission, and I think they could have expanded on that and had a few more side missions other than ones that were just pretty much the same as the main campaign, but were just smaller ships and with varying difficulty. With the bosses, again, I found the same issue with Dale, that at the beginning you face a boss and it's sort of, you're sort of like, oh, this is really cool, there'll be loads of these throughout the game, and then there wasn't, and you got to the end and there was, you know, the main one on the Mothergunship, but that was it. So I do think they could have expanded on that a bit more and had sort of, rather than at the end of the rooms you just running into a room and jumping on a detonator, an actual boss at the end of some of those, or to fight, would have made it a bit more interesting.
So in terms of scores, I did mostly enjoy this one. I don't think it's one I'll continue to play though, basically just because of this continuity of once you've completed the main campaign, it's just like it just continues on and on. So I don't think it's going to be one I'm necessarily going to come back to. So for me, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
So for me, I don't have any other bullet hell games to compare it to, but I found it really good fun to play, and it's one I think I would come back to. It's got that endless continuation that you mentioned, but it's quite fun to sort of play through just for a laugh and just to de-stress, I suppose, blow the shit out of some alien scum. So yeah, for me, it's 8 out of 10.
Okay guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.